Benissimo, siamo qui stasera per un altro episodio di DiEM25TV Goes Local, questa sera con Istvan Teplan, storico dell'economia, sociologo, cofondatore dell'Università Centrale Europea assieme a George Soros e presidente della Fondazione Prosum. Questo incontro, questo episodio verrà trasmesso in inglese, moderatrice sarà Stefania Romano dell'NC Italia e coordinatrice del Green New Deal for Europe. E quindi passiamo subito la parola a lei e benvenuti.
Istvan, put the video on and unmute the micro, please.
I can't. You have to, the video you have to do. Okay.
Okay, fantastic. So welcome everybody. I'm very happy, Istvan, to see you, although meantime only virtually. Hopefully, for the next future it will be in real terms. I mean, I'm also very happy and glad to be bridging you up with DiEM25 movement, which, as you know, is a transnational movement which has been co-founded by Yanis Varoufakis. Now, I will just put you in the picture and very shortly highlighting your, most milestone in your professional career. And I would like to be reading a quote from Wikipedia that I like very much and I think is very punctual about yourself. That says, Istvan Teplan is one of the creators of the first international Western-style graduate school in the post-communist century Europe. Also, you have been, board member of different EU institutions and different international organizations, and served in several advisory panels. And presently, you are the president of the Prosum Foundation, which is defending the press rights, which I would say is quite a rare gem, especially nowadays, there where the press freedom is something not necessarily granted. So I think it also requires a lot of resilience. Now, going back to where we are nowadays, we are confined at home. Unfortunately, this lockdown is keeping us home, and this invisible virus crashed on us unexpected, but in fact for long. Experts, health and environmental experts had just warned about incumbent environmental crises. So the first question that I would like to raise to you is, how is the Hungarian government acting towards COVID-19? Above all, considering that mostly, the funds over the Orban government has been diverted rather than on the healthcare system, on sports stadiums and such. So how is the government reacting to COVID-19?
I'm not a public health expert, so I can only tell my opinion and also the way how I see the Hungarian situation. This pandemic, I'm afraid, didn't hit Hungary very hard yet. And one just can hope it stays that way, but I also can imagine that worse days are coming. What I know, which you said in your question, that the Hungarian public health system is in a very poor condition. In a very poor condition, it never was really reformed in a way that it should have been. Several governments tried to reform it, but this government especially let it down. And a lot of the doctors and a lot of the nurses left Hungary because they so poorly paid, and the work conditions are very poor. Hungary has, I think, among the EU countries, unfortunately one of the worst public health situation. People are dying very early. There are lots of diseases that the very high rate of cancer, etc., and they are queuing to get into hospitals. They were queuing to get the treatment, to get the operation. So it was before the pandemic. It was in a very poor situation. The doctors are grossly underpaid. I just read recently an article that an emergency room doctor who is on the front line received his paycheck and he put it up on the internet. It was 185,000 forints, which is something like 600 euros. And this is a medical doctor who is saving lives in the front line of the of this pandemic. So Hungary was not prepared at all for the situation, and the necessary upgrading of the hospitals, and most of all the decent pay structure for the medical personnel never happened. This is why there was this huge exodus of trained nurses and doctors, and you can find Hungarian doctors in England, in Austria, in Scandinavia, and nurses and other medical workers. And this is not a lot of the general physicians posts in the countryside were unfilled because they just didn't find people to fill those positions, which was always bad. And the you know, in some areas even the ambulance for several cases that it couldn't get in time to the patient. Now imagine that this pretty dilapidated medical system is hit by this pandemic. We know very little how the government is acting, because it is absolutely not transparent in Hungary. We only know what they want us to know. There are this daily briefing of some command center of the government, but you know, we only know half of the truth. So we don't know exactly how many people are infected and where we are on the. They usually say that this is the Gauss curve, that it goes up, and you have to flatten the curve to prepare the to be prepared for when it really hits the country hard. But what we know is that the government ordered this lockdown at the end of March, which I think it was a good idea, and then started to empty hospital capacities, and they managed to empty some 36,000 beds, you know, to be prepared for if the disease really reaches its peak. But the way that was done, it's again was a horrible stories that people were just you know, sent home. They just vacated the hospital beds in a very brutal way. There were, you know, all sorts of stories that people with advanced cancer and, you know, with all sorts of other diseases. They were just sent home, absolutely unsure who will take care of them, because the and we learned that two hospitals director refused to empty the beds, and they were immediately fired. And some military type commanders are appointed to oversee the hospital operation, which I think it's crazy. It really should have been the other way around. It is like if someone driving a plane and you make a person sit next to the pilot who is telling the commands but doesn't know how to fly a plane. And you know, this plane metaphor is actually really fits here, because I think we are flying blind. We don't know which way this is going. But what you implicated in the question is absolutely true, that a lot of the EU funds and the government's priorities were a lot of this showcase investments, a lot of sport investment. Even these days, when we are in the middle of this crisis, some 200 million forints a day spent on sport, you know, on sports stadiums, and you know, Hungary used to be a good you know, a country with good soccer players, but not anymore. You know, it was a long time ago. It's not like Italy, but you know, it's not private money. Is either companies get a tax break to support sport, or the government directly channeling money to into different sport events and games, all sorts of European and world games, way beyond the means of Hungary. And you know, you could tell all these examples which you heard in the media, and very little was spent on upgrading the medical system.
So you are in lockdown, but somehow no real, not transparently, and then somehow real criticism doesn't come up to be, you know, criticizing what.
Yeah, you know, that's a whole other story, that there is very little media now in Hungary which is not controlled directly by the government. And what we know, and that's why I'm saying we are flying blind, that the government introduced the lockdown, and now the government is easing the lockdown. But we don't really know, you know, the data. Is very little testing in Hungary, very little testing. We only know that we have less than 3,000 confirmed cases, but I think this figure is just due to the lack of testing, and the death toll is around 300, which is not high. This suggests that the peak is still ahead of us. So I don't know if they ease now the lockdown and the restrictions, like the matriculation exams will be next week. Students have to get to the places where they write. There will be a written exam nationwide. They have to get there by public transportation, you know, and they will be in a room with others. It sounds like not a good idea, if you ask me. But we don't know, because there's very little transparency, and because there is no mass testing, we won't even know. So you only know the very tragic cases when someone is passing away. It's always saying that these are only people who had medical issues or conditions, or very aging people. But you know, there are other cases cases too. And since there is no testing now, they ordered a lot of test kits from China, and apparently a lot of those kits are just useless. Is garbage. They ordered millions, and it's also pathetic that the whole disease is started in China, and now China is cashing on selling very low quality masks and test kits and whatever, and the Hungarian government is totally buying in to this Chinese.
Why are these tests useless? Why?
I don't know. It's they just unreliable. They don't show. You know, a lot of those people who are positive, the test doesn't show who are they're positive, and it shows negative, and shows the other way around. They say there were articles by some very you know, members of the Hungarian Academy of Sciences, virologists, and that the tests are just not reliable, and there's very little testing, and you know, everybody knows now that wherever, you know, those countries which tested heavily, they really could control the disease. But you know, again, I only can say that we have an unprepared country with a very rundown medical system, and maybe now we have 36,000 empty beds, but whether you have the equipment, whether you have the trained personnel, it's a whole different story. And we don't even know where we are at the on the curve. So it only will tell. And now they're easing the lockdown next week, which may be a very dangerous things, but it's just a partial easement, but I think the most vulnerable, I hope I will be wrong, but I think the most vulnerable people will pay the price.
Like always, unfortunately. Istvan, can I say that you are the co-founder of the Central European University? In fact, you have been in the first meeting that was in Dubrovnik in 1989 to be setting it up. That the idea was to be creating this educational system for training the next generations of leaders, for getting, you know, the Central European area transitioning towards democracy. I would call you, if I may, the father of CEU, because you made it grow and you made it develop. In fact, now my question is, how do you feel about the fact that it's been moved from Budapest to Vienna, and above all, could it have been averted?
I have to correct you in two phrases. I think it's a little exaggeration that I'm the father, but I played some role in the establishment of the CEU. And unfortunately, the CEU wasn't moved from Budapest. It was forced out. And I'm very, very sad about this. And you know, it's a very sad story, because in the early 90s, when the CEU was established, it was almost there was a time of great hopes. I remember the very first meeting which I participated in Dubrovnik, in a center which was later in the Yugoslav wars destroyed by mortar fire, and it is rebuilt by then. And then that meeting, people from different Central and Eastern European countries gathered. There were a series of seminars. There were Poles and Czechs and Hungarians, etc. And this is where the idea came up that we really should have an institution which would try to put all the differences and tensions of this region, which had a very sad, tragic history. Both of the World Wars started in this in this region, and try to bring together, as you said, the next generation of intellectuals and leaders, etc. And this, with the help of course, with the help of George Soros, it came into existence. First, it was a tri-city university. First Prague, because then the late Václav Havel was very helpful, and then for a while in Warsaw, and of course in Budapest. And it was a real exemplary thing that after all the horrors of the 20th century, young people came together, Romania, and those who have historic differences came together and studied in the same classroom. Even during the Yugoslav wars, there were Serbians, Croats, Bosnians at CEU. So it was a very promising institution. But of course, the times were different than today. That time, people wanted to be together. Yeah. They were longing for the other. Today, everybody wants to be separate and look for someone to hate. In that sense, I think it's not only the failure of CEU, but also the failure of the post-communist Eastern or Central Europe. And there was a long thing to get accreditation, etc., because it was an unusual institution. It was only graduate, concentrating on social sciences. And I always put it in a way that CEU is about Central Europe and for Central Europe, for the Central Europeans. That changed a lot over the years, and lost its Central European character, which I still think it's a mistake, because those departments who dealt with the medieval Central Europe or the 19th and 20th century history of Central Europe, they immediately became among the best in the region. The first environmental science and policy department was at the CEU, the first gender studies in the region. So in a lot of areas, the departments which were at CEU were the very first one. Later, a lot of other universities followed suit, but with this unusual character, it was very difficult to get accreditation. And first that was a US accreditation in the state of New York, then by the Middle States accreditation, and then Europe, the Hungarian, and which is an EU recognized accreditation. It still remained a very unique institution, but some of its departments were very, very quickly listed among the best. The CEU was always way ahead of any other Hungarian university, and it was never really liked by certain people in Hungary. But even when were governments which were not absolutely thrilled with the idea of CEU, they still respected it. You know, the late József Antal, who was the first freely elected prime minister, and his ministers, they always came to the CEU, and even during the first Orbán government, there were a good communication. I mean, sometimes, you know, some government liked it better, some government liked it less, but there was always a mutual respect. We tried, the CEU tried to respect the host country and give a lot to the host country, because CEU had the best, that time, you know, that was not everything online, had the best library. I was then the vice president. We opened up for all graduate students and researchers and university teachers the CEU library. You know, it was a lot of things that all the public lectures, when CEU was able to invite much more high profile speakers than other universities, they always invited or arranged a second lecture at the ELTE University, etc. So and there always was a respect from the government. And in the last 10 years, something fundamentally changed when the Orbán government came into power. You felt that no stone will left be unturned. That this is why sometimes I feel I'm old enough that I'm in a under a totalitarian regime. It has to control everything, including university, the Academy of Sciences, the media, the theaters, you know, God knows what. And but the government propaganda is really shivering. It really brings back very unpleasant historical memories, because they just design a propaganda campaign. And before the 2018 elections, they always have to find some enemy, some enemy that they can ignite feelings of people, someone to blame, and take away the attention from the real problems. And before 2018, it was clear, after 2015, that these are the migrants who will invade Hungary or whatnot, which was not totally unfounded, because there was this migration problem. And then the other one was picked, Soros. That Soros is the quintessential enemy. And I think the CEU is just a victim in the crossfire. You know, because it is funded by Soros, they had to attack the university. But of course, the university also had a lot of people who didn't stay silent, made criticism, but it was basically Soros. And you had to find, you know, Brussels was also an enemy, but you know, the best enemy is someone that people know, doesn't have a government behind it, who would raise eyebrows and say, you know, this is too much. So you pick a single person who is well known, very vocal in issues like migration, and they started this crazy billboard campaign where Soros was. It was really, in my opinion, it had a strong anti-Semitic undertone, and was really a reminder of the 1930s of Germany or the 50s in in the Stalinist countries, that he was picked as an enemy, and then they started to pressure all the civil. CEU is not the only one. It's all the civil movement, the civil society organizations were all under attack, even environmental organizations, and then CEU was also under attack. And CEU, I have to be frank here, the CEU also made mistakes, because I think the CEU should have paid much more attention to comply with the with the Higher Education Act. And this, I don't want to go into the details, but the new Higher Education Act, after under the first Orban government, changed the criteria what is a university, and those universities who operate in Hungary who don't meet all the criteria can get a waiver if the existence of the university is supported by an international agreement. And it was basically to allow the Andrássy, the German language university, to operate, which is also exactly like CEU, not so high quality, but not so well known, but also doesn't meet the criteria of the Higher Education Act. And it was supported by an agreement between Hungary, Bavaria, and I think Baden-Württemberg. And that allows you not to have an undergraduate. Basically, you have to have the 3 levels: undergrad, BA, MA, PhD, and in several subjects. And where the CEU and Andrássy don't meet the criteria, none of them has undergraduate section. And then similarly to the Andrássy agreement, the Hungarian government, which I was instrumental to bring this together, and the state of New York, that time Governor Pataki, agreed on the support of the CEU. Thus, it could be waived, not having an undergraduate session. But I always was in the opinion that if you want to operate long run in a country, you better meet all the criteria, because you are then at the mercy of a government, and if they want to sign an agreement or renew an agreement, they do it. If they don't, it's perfectly within their right to say, I don't. And Orban didn't want to renew the agreement with the US, with the state of New York. And of course, Andrássy is renewed, CEU is not renewed. And then that is put into question the whole operation of the US part of the CEU here in Hungary. But I think the CEU packed up too quickly. I think they should have resisted and fought more, not just packing up and go to Vienna, because I think the future in Vienna is also uncertain, and of course the times are different, and I really just hope that I still look at it as my baby, that it will survive this, but I think it's very, very uncertain, and we're living in very different times, and the benefactor is also very old, and he was a driving force to bring the CEU into existence, and he's over 90. So I don't know whether those American universities who support it, how they will act in the long run, whether CEU will remain an independent institution. And
resisting.
If it goes down, you know, it's still, I think it will be remembered in history as a very important post-1989 institution, which helped to change this region.
I would say, Istvan, that you are resisting quite bravely, in fact, in a very admirable way, because you're writing quite strong articles and publishing them. I think you're one of the fewest intellectuals still resisting. Recently, you have written, I just quote the sentence, which is very strong. Orban's Fidesz has become an extreme organization, as well as an active destroyer of the said European values and unity. I think it's quite a strong sentence, and I'm so surprised that you're not being pulled out as well. You know, that you're strongly resisting, and I happily see it. You know, because there are like common friends like Iles Zoltan. You know, who's been a strong environmental activist who's been still fighting, but alone somehow. Has been pulled out from all the institutional, administrative positions, unfortunately. Istvan, you're also an economist, historian economist. I would like to ask you, many climate and the social policy experts are being strongly recommended a green stimulus package for restarting the economy. Don't you think that we should be coming up with a new economic model that is not profit-oriented, but that takes through a shift, a cultural shift that is based on social values? Do you think that we are going to be learning on the lessons of these, disruptions, and finally we'll be addressing climate change and environmental crisis?
I hope so, that things won't be business as usual after the crisis. Okay. I don't know, there are different views of, how the economies or the world economy will bounce back. And because this pandemic is really not not an economic phenomenon. Is something which came outside. It's not like a economic cycle or a inflation or an overproduction or the subprime mortgage crisis. It came, Deus ex machina. And I don't know whether this strong stop of the whole operation of the world economy will be followed by a very strong bouncing back or a long extended crisis. In Hungary, I'm afraid that it will be a crisis, because Hungary has a very strong tie, let's say, to the German auto industry, and the whole vertical supply chain behind this is built on the car industry. Opel, Mercedes, Audi, Suzuki. It's a big portion of the Hungarian economy. The other one is tourism. Hungary is very dependent on tourism, so these two areas won't bounce back very easily. But I think after the crisis, this is a wake-up call. I think the finally those ideas that like the two Rio conferences in 1992 and when was that, 2012?
Wow.
Yeah,
I was in Brazil at that time.
Yeah, they put it out as goals. They will be finally get some attention, because one thing is, to me, is sure, that the economic growth, which is based on increasing use of natural resources and cheap labor, it's over. I don't think it can go this way, and I think you have to revalue the whole world economic system. And I think those which were in the Millennium Development Goals, local production, not to go beyond 100 kilometers, etc. I hope it will be revised. I really have serious doubts that every supply chain in every production has to go all the way to China. And it's also, in my mind, it's not right that the most dynamic part of the world economy, namely China, was operating the most unsustainable way. They were the ones who most exploited the natural and the social resources, cheap labor, pollution, etc. I think this China dependency has to be stopped. It cannot be that all the supply chains are depending on China. I also think that the general agreement on trades and tariffs has to be revised, and which it's a long thing. It was already in 1992 in Rio, and also in the Club of Rome and the limits of growth. They were all saying a long time ago that you really have to take into consideration of the externalities and the ecosystem services. You cannot disregard them. Herman Daly and Schumacher and Ben Meadows and others said it a long time ago. But I hope that after this crisis, this will be revisited. This idea that the international multinationals cannot just follow the route where the cheapest labor is, or where are the most lax environmental regulations are, because this is what this pandemic shows. Now, if something happens, it doesn't stop at the border. So I think those countries who don't take this into consideration should be penalized with higher tariffs. I don't think that the laissez-faire should be applied the way that we totally blind to the externalities they use. They totally blind, what they cause to third parties, with disease, with air pollution, with water pollution, etc., or the overuse of agriculture, etc. So I don't think that it can go on like that. I think there has to be a new strategy for world economy, and it really needs to revisit, because these are not new things. Herman Daly and Ehrlich and whoever, they formulated this a long time. There's a whole group of economists who would deal, but they always were looked at almost like a sect or weirdos or I don't know, like
new age thing, like
yeah.
New age thing.
But I think in a lot of ways it is true that I think good quality and much lower consumption has to come into the picture, that we over consume, and the only way I can imagine that it's a higher price, higher labor price, higher environmental cost, ergo it is higher consumer prices. And I know governments don't like that because they want to get reelected, and they afraid to allow this. But on the other things are all the the negative things. So I think it has to be a revaluation of human labor, has to be a revaluation of the externalities, has to be a revaluation of the ecosystem services. Therefore, it has to, you know, a new arrangement of the world economy is, I hope it will come. And, you know, I think China didn't act right in this pandemic. And after all, it's a, you know, it's a communist dictatorship, what you expect. But it's not only their fault. It was the multinational companies who moved everything to China just because of profit and greed. And this has to be changed. And it's only can be changed if more and more people agree with this and limit their own consumption, their own own desires, and consume less. And also, I think it has to be a very different price system. You know, if you ask me, I wouldn't even restart air traffic in Europe. You know, it's
complicated though.
Much better to travel by train.
You know, the other day I was talking to Nick Maybe from UK E3G, and he was telling me that it has not really circulated, you know, in the articles throughout media. But Boris Johnson, after having recovered from COVID-19, he has repudiated Thatcherian and Reaganian liberalism. This is a very good, you know, hope for a new path forward somehow, hopefully. The last question that I wanted to raise is, let's talk about democracy. Churchill would say that democracy is the worst of the, you know, form of government except for all the others. Now, for a healthy democracy, how shall we act? Meaning that mostly democracy means to be, you know, accepting the majority opinion, even though sometimes it's just made up of mediocres, right? So how can we have a healthy democracy if over, you know, the last decades, all governments all throughout and across have been cut on education, on art, on culture, and then people are just, you know, having social impacts of unemployment and such, and then they're just struggling with each other for grabbing a piece of the cake or devouring, you know, plundering all the cake. So how can we start a new kind of politics and economy? What is the starting point?
I think what you said about democracy is absolutely true, that once you have a majority, you basically can do anything. But I think democracy is would only work if there is a adequate protection of the minority things, like the paradox of the let's say, take Hungary as an example, that a government playing on the feelings of people, using a very sophisticated media, gets democratically elected, though sometimes it is questioned whether, you know, everything was democratic in the election process itself. But, you know, once you elected and have the majority, then you can start to destroy all the democratic institutions
Exactly.
through which you were elected, and you know, you can make a complete mockery out of democracy, because it looks like there is an independent juridical system, except you removed all the judges and put your own people in that. You look like there is a media, except you control all the important media outlets, and also control the revenues of the commercial outlets. So you pretty much can control everything. And there is this enabling act of Hungary, which is unlimited time and otherwise. And a lot of people say, what is your problem? They could do anything anyway because they have 2/3 majority in the parliament. But it's still a difference, because with this enabling act, you pretty much take out all the three powers of the only the executive remains in place, and no checks and balances. And what is very sad is that that Hungary is part of the European Union, and so is Poland, and the European Union is not doing too much. Pretty much, I think, because the German car companies get their tax breaks from the government, and they defend, and they also like the way the Hungarian workers are treated. They pretty much ripped off every right from the laborers. They totally defend less against the multinational companies. So the EU is sitting there and looking at it, and it didn't reach the level of a hard dictatorship, but it's definitely getting close to a very strong authoritarian proto-dictatorship, with all the democratic institution in place, except this enabling act, because even the name is really resembling the 1933 enabling act. But it looks like a democratic institution. That's why what they always say, oh well, we have press, we have judges, we have the attorney or whatever, except that they don't never investigate any corruption cases, which looks like that it's attached to the government, and the government has its favorites, the EU financing it, and feeding the oligarchs, and the oligarchs in return are helping to keep the regime in power. So it is on the surface it looks like a democratic thing, and unfortunately it can make an example, because there are other autocrats who are, I'm not talking about Putin and Erdogan and China. Those are clear, but there are the little ones like Orban, who standing on their tippy toes to become a dictator and try to be someone, and then when they succeed, then others will get the Italian guys and others will say, oh, he can do it, he can get away with it, then I can get away with it. It sets an example, and unfortunately so far the message of the EU is that we're not happy, we don't want to be on the same photograph with the guy, we don't kiss him, but we don't do anything. Juncker slapped him in the face friendly, but it's he's not comme il faut. He wouldn't be invited to the dinner table or the salon, but until it doesn't make a bigger problem and gives the tax breaks to the multis, he will be left left alone. And when it's like every person with this character, they push and they see how far they can go. And if they see that I can go further, I will go further, even further, and then others will follow suit. And I'm in that sense, I'm very upset with the EU. It's the same thing with the way they act towards China. That I think it's flabbergasting that they took out the criticism of their report because of the China is dangerous. China is a dictatorship with advanced technology, with economic efficiency, and not only accepting the rules when it's favorable for them. And the EU is assisting to that. That the same thing with this. There are people in Europe who try to destroy, and that's what I said, the value, the checks and balances, the freedom of press, the independent juridical system, etc., impartial public media. They try to destroy all this, and they are still financed by the EU. But of course, I don't want to blur your picture. I think it is basically the responsibility of the Hungarian voters, because until the Hungarian voters won this, because they still could vote the other, and I hope they will at the next election. But the more the power of a government, this government now is here for 10 years, for God's sake. It's even from pancake 10 is a lot, not 10 years of a government, and the more they are in power, the more tools they have to cement in their powers, to make control, to make fake news, to influence public opinion, whatever. But still, I think the responsibility of the voters, and I really believe in that the responsibility of the individual, the same towards the environment. It's your personal choice is what matters, and people, if people understand this, that it was my choice to put this guy into this power. It is my choice how I act towards the environment, and if people understand this, then things will change.
It's just a show, as you're highlighting, as much as Milada Horakova was highlighting when she was fakely tried. She said it clearly. It's a theater. It's a theater. So I don't know if there are any questions from the audience, and if we have time left, in fact, because it's 7:30. Okay, if there is no questions. I mean, what can I say? I would really, I thank you so much for this talk. You gave us a lot of inputs and insights, to be elaborating a clear picture of what's happening nowadays in Hungary, which is a little bit scary, and it's also because it's following also other governments in other countries, not only Hungary. Let's hope that this COVID-19 will bring some reflection, will make us think about that this crisis is just the result of the wrong actions from human beings, but that other crises will come if we don't urgently act and properly. So let's hope for the future, and thank you all a lot. And I'm sure that if anybody from the audience will be will want to be in touch with you, we will certainly pass your contact. And thanks a lot, and see you soon in reality, though, not virtually. Hopefully, not air. I hope that the air traveling will be soon again allowed. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank for the DiEM25 and all the other people who have been present at this talk, and talk soon. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you. Thank you.